All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to objectively unpack a deeply polarized, frankly unprecedented speech about U.S. election integrity. And then we're going to look at exactly how the internet immediately reacted to it. We're sticking strictly to the claims made in the broadcast and the cultural fallout that followed, basically mapping out the anatomy of a major announcement. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the context and opening claims, move into the 5 specific intelligence pillars they presented, check out the proposed legislative solution, and finally break down that digital reaction from online commentators. Okay, Section 1, Context and Opening Claims, setting the stage for the declassification. So the speech kicks off by drawing a really sharp contrast, pitching past economic and border successes against some major current challenges. It basically sets up this narrative of a nation facing one singular critical threat. The key takeaway for us here is the underlying philosophy. The core phrase, no trust, no greatness, serves as the absolute launchpad for all the explosive claims that come next. The argument is that no matter how good the economy or the military is, if there's no faith in the voting system, the whole foundation of the nation is completely undermined. Driven by that exact thesis, the speaker then drops a bombshell, announcing the immediate declassification of documents gathered by a White House transparency task force. And this wasn't pitched as just some standard policy proposal, no. This was framed as a massive, live release of alleged intelligence findings, pushed right to whitehouse.gov so the American public could read it in real time. Moving right along to Section 2, 5 election vulnerability claims, the intelligence pillars. These 5 pillars are really the absolute core of the broadcast's allegations. They cover the whole shebang, from international hacking and local voter fraud, all the way up to domestic cover-ups supposedly executed by what the speech described as rogue bureaucrats. Let's break down the most striking details from each of these pillars one by one. First up, the sheer scale of this claim is, well, staggering. The speaker alleged that starting in the 2020 election cycle, China acquired a whopping 220 million U.S. voter files. Actually, scratch that, it wasn't just basic files. The speech claimed this was a massive data sweep, including names, phone numbers, and political party preferences, all supposedly scooped up by a dedicated Chinese data exploitation unit. To put that in perspective, that is a massive chunk of the country's population. Now, to back up the second pillar, which focuses on bureaucratic suppression, the speech cited specific CIA reporting. The claim here is that China actively tried to undermine the administration because, well, the U.S. was charging them billions in tariffs and aggressively building up the military. Essentially, the allegation is that China funded opposition groups and even bought off journalists to make absolutely sure the president would lose the election. And this part brilliantly captures the friction of that second pillar. The speech aggressively pitted the public official narrative, the claim that 2020 was the most secure election in history, against allegations of a massive internal cover-up. The speaker claimed that intelligence analysts deliberately massaged daily presidential briefings to hide the truth. They even described an FBI official running a quote-unquote shadow government and claimed that Obama-era burn bags, which were supposedly meant to destroy crucial evidence, were only discovered out of sheer incompetence. From there, the speech laid out a very specific timeline of these alleged threats, leading right into the third pillar, voting machine vulnerabilities. The released documents supposedly cover a systemic cyber threat period stretching from January 2020 all the way out to June 2026. Within that window, the speaker referenced CIA reports about a plot tied to Venezuela's Maduro regime. The claim is that they developed ways to digitally alter vote totals that would completely evade audits, leaving U.S. systems exposed to that exact same kind of manipulation. To round out the claims of covered-up local voter fraud and non-citizen registrations, the speaker pointed to 2 specific investigations. First, an alleged raid on a Get Out the Vote organization in Muskegon, Michigan, where canvassers supposedly admitted to a pay, play, and cheat scheme involving gift cards. Second, they cited a DHS review that allegedly identified around 278,000 non-citizens registered to vote in federal elections. And the speaker argued that number was probably way higher, claiming some states just flat out refused to share their full voter files. All right, Section 3, the Save America Act, the legislative solution. After laying out all those vulnerabilities, the speech takes a hard pivot from diagnosing the problem to demanding direct action. The proposed solution, the Save America Act. This basically boils down to 3 really strict requirements to completely overhaul how voting works. Step 1, mandate photo voter ID for everyone. Step 2, require definitive proof of citizenship to even register. And Step 3, implement a near-total ban on mail-in ballots, with the only exceptions being for severe illness, military deployment, or out-of-town business travel. The speaker drew a massive contrast between the current state of elections and the tight, secure system this act promises. To really hammer the point home, they called out California, pointing out that a recent local election there took over a month just to count the votes. The core argument here is that having tens of millions of ballots, quote, floating aimlessly through the mail, creates a system that's just inherently begging for the exact kind of foreign and domestic corruption outlined in those new documents. Which brings us to Section 4, the digital reaction, the cultural fallout. So, how did the internet process these massive claims? Let's take a look. Our first reaction comes from a YouTuber named Nuxtaku. What's super fascinating here is that Nux didn't look at this primarily as domestic election policy. Instead, he saw it through a purely geopolitical lens. To him, this speech was a massive, aggressive chess move on the world stage. Nux theorized that the U.S. is only in a position to make these bold, direct hacking claims against China right now because American oil exports have essentially backed the Chinese government into a corner. His take is that the U.S. has cut off China's alternatives, like Venezuela and Iran. Because of that, China just has to sit there and take these public accusations without retaliating, simply because they desperately rely on American oil. It's a wildly different angle, right? Now, on the flip side, we have commentator George AAA, and his reaction was deeply, deeply personal and emotional. While Nux was looking at global oil markets, George was looking at his own life and his own career over the past few years. George explained that he actually started his YouTube channel covering the 2020 election when he was still in high school, just feeling in his gut that something was off with the results. Well, he ended up getting banned from YouTube in 2021 after a Media Matters article labeled him an election denier. So for George, sitting there hearing the president cite official DHS, FBI, and CIA reports, that was absolute, irrefutable proof that he had been right along. He saw this massive intelligence drop purely as total personal vindication. But here is the really interesting part. Despite having wildly different takes, one hyper-geopolitical, one hyper-personal, both of these commentators landed on the exact same common ground. Both talked openly about being demonetized or banned by digital platforms for their views. And more importantly, both shared a fierce, aggressive desire for legal retribution. Right after the speech, both creators were calling for the DOJ to step in. They were literally hoping and praying for treason trials and demanding serious jail time for anyone involved in the alleged cover-ups. As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look at the bigger picture here. We've got a political figure using the weight of declassified federal intelligence to make explosive claims, and an internet culture that instantly internalizes those claims as absolute validation for their own worldviews. So it begs the question, when unprecedented intelligence claims meet immediate, highly monetized digital vindication, where does our political conversation even go from here? Does this kind of thing bridge the divide, or does it permanently shatter how we agree on basic reality? Thanks for joining me as we unpacked these sources. Keep questioning and keep learning.